President Hanley, we are live.
Okay. Better than the opposite.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Hi.
We all here?
Looks like we are now. Hey, Linda.
Okay, I think I see everybody. Okay, let's jump right in here. I'm going to call this meeting to order, a special board meeting of the San Mateo Union High School District Board. In accordance with AB 361, the board has adopted findings that meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees of in-person meetings. Consistent with those findings, this board meeting will be held remotely. Let me take roll call. Trustee Griffin.
Present.
Trustee Zuniga.
Present.
Trustee Land.
Here.
Trustee Dwyer.
Present.
And I am here. Let me do some housekeeping to make sure everyone is clear. We have our Spanish interpreter for the meeting this evening, Mr. Enrique Montaldo. For those who would like to attend the meeting in Spanish, that option is available. Enrique, would you please just communicate that for us this evening?
Absolutely. Tenemos a nuestro intérprete de español para la reunión de esta tarde. Para aquellos de ustedes que quieran asistir a la reunión en español, esta opción está disponible. Gracias.
Thank you. If you wish to view closed captions of this meeting, please view the meeting on the San Mateo Union High School District Board Meeting YouTube channel. The link to the YouTube channel can be found on our website. You may view the captions in English as we live stream our meeting tonight, and you may also view the captions in a variety of other languages if you choose to watch after the meeting has ended. Viewers may request additional accommodations by calling 650-558-2201. We will take public comment on each agenda item after the presentations have been made. If you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand. We will call on you after the presentation, and then the board will discuss the item. So I think our next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Griffin, could you do the honors of leading us in Pledge of Allegiance?
So that I get my microphone unmuted. Everybody please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first item this evening is the superintendent search. And we have three highly qualified firms that have submitted proposals to the board and have asked to be considered. for the search. And we are, I think, Mr. Black, we've asked them to each make up to a 10-minute presentation to us. And we've allowed up to around 15 minutes, although if the board has more questions, we can go beyond that. But we're thinking 10 to 15 minutes of questions after the presentation for each firm. And we'll give every firm a fairly equal chance to present and to answer questions. Do you have an order, Mr. Black, as to which one?
Yes, we have, Shar has them in the waiting room. We have one at 5:35, 6, and 6:25. So they have 25 minutes each, and it starts with Hazard, Young, and Atia, and then Leadership Associates, and then McPherson and Jacobson at the 6:25 slot. So if you're ready, Shar will just promote them.
I'm
Okay,
bringing in Mr. Cash and Mr. Mistel from HYA.
okay. Welcome, gentlemen.
Well, good evening. It's our pleasure to be here and present on behalf of Hazard, Young, and Atia, and I'm joined by Bob Mistel.
Very nice to meet you this evening.
Nice to meet you and good to see you all. If you could move the slide, please. So my name's David Cash, and I'm a retired superintendent. I did 15 years in the superintendent seat in 3 school districts in California, Claremont, California, Clovis, California, and Santa Barbara, California. I also taught elementary school and high school and was an elementary school principal, junior high school principal, and high school principal. And I've been an associate with Hazard, Young, and Atia for the last 6 years and conducted numerous searches in the Bay Area in many districts surrounding San Mateo. And Bob.
Thanks, Dave. Sorry to step on you earlier. Pleasure to meet you all this evening. As Dave said, my name is Bob Mistel. I recently finished 7 years as superintendent of the Los Gatos Saratoga High School District. I've been in the county for about 13 years now. I spent the majority of my career before that in the San Luis Obispo area as an elementary, secondary, and high school principal. Had the opportunity to start a new high school down in the San Luis Obispo area. As is Dave, I was an elementary and a secondary teacher. I'm currently coaching, and I've been an associate for HYA for roughly 2.5 years now.
Next slide, please. So what is the HYA difference? Mostly Bob and I are obviously focused on California searches, having done dozens in the state of California, but we are a national search firm, which means that if the community of San Mateo feels that they would like the search to be conducted nationwide, well, we definitely have the capacity to do so with hundreds of associates working in states throughout the United States. Our process is entirely research-based. We have been engaged in this. We're the oldest superintendent search firm in the nation, having done this work for over 40 years. One of the things that we are most proud of is the way in which we engage our community. We understand that no voice can go unheard in the superintendent search process. And so we do everything we can to ensure that we hear from all the voices, not just the traditional voices that are often heard in schools and school districts, but those voices which often are unheard. And we will do whatever it takes in order to listen to them. We work hard to build a search timeline that meets your objectives. And in our proposal, we simply put together a timeline as a draft so that you could just see that a comprehensive search could be conducted in a timely manner to have a new superintendent in place by July 1st. And then finally, we do engage in what we think is significant due diligence in background checks for all the candidates in which apply and those at which we recommend. And we feel very strongly that one of the most significant things about our difference is that if the board in San Mateo decides to have HYA conduct the search, this will be the only search that Bob and I will be doing at this time, which we feel is significantly important, meaning all of our energies will be focused on your board and your community's needs. Next slide.
Thank you. Just really briefly about our board portal. As you know, communication and organization are going to be critical to having a successful search. Our web-based delivery system allows the board anytime, anywhere access to all of the documents that we have regarding the search. And as Dave said, it could be a regionally localized California search up to a national search. We have the ability to pivot and meet the needs of the district as we move forward with that search. You'll have confidential access to all the information that we've received. It'll be organized in a way that's very transparent and allows you to access it on your time, not on ours. Next
slide, please.
Thanks. I want to talk to you about the engagement phase. So that would be the beginning of our search and our plans with the district. We'll make a commitment to you that we will thoroughly engage your community in a very thoughtful process that we'll use to gather input. We're looking at engagement of all stakeholders, our community interest groups meetings and individual meetings. So we'll meet with any group that you would like us to in relation to the schools. We'll meet with PTSOs, PTSAs. We'll obviously meet with teachers. We'll meet with parent groups. We'll do that remotely, which would probably work best. We're finding that in the COVID era, it does work well as far as engaging community members and school communities, just because of the timeliness of being able to step in whenever they want. Our research, we also have a research-based survey tool, which is going to be available in several languages that will be presented and used. We'll provide disaggregated data by stakeholder groups for you with that information. So some keys from this engagement phase. We're going to conduct a planning meeting with the board. We'll provide you with a summary and a detailed timeline and steps of the search process that we've agreed upon with you. We're going to survey the community and your community constituents and provide a report of those findings for each of the community groups that we have met. We're going to provide you individual consultant or focus groups interview times for town hall meetings, if that's how you would like us to proceed, or gather in-person input as decided by the board. We'll obviously be interviewing each of the board members separately and your administrator separately, trying to gather input for the next superintendent. We're going to provide you a leadership profile that will bring to the board, which will show you what the community is thinking are desirable characteristics for the next superintendent based on our survey data. And then we'll be with you obviously through the hiring and the contract phase of the search process.
Next slide, please. So one of the other HYA differences is that we're going to be recruiting candidates based upon what you tell us and your community tells us you'd like to see in the next superintendent. We're not going to bring forward a stable of other candidates that may have been unsuccessful in other districts that we think, oh, maybe the board would like to interview them. What we're going to do really carefully is listen to what you and your community tell us they'd like to see in the next superintendent. And then we're going to do a lot of purposeful recruitment. Both Bob and I have been longtime members of the Association of California School Administrators, past presidents. I'm a past president of the Southern California Superintendents Association, the Suburban School Superintendents, which is a national organization. And we have contacts throughout the state, which we would actively recruit candidates once we have a good understanding what the board and the community are looking for. The other thing that we have with HYA is we have a very active web page where we have currently over 6,000 people activated. We've found that in most of the searches we do, it's about 2/3, 1/3 as far as recruiting versus those that just apply for the position when they hear about it. And what we will also do is we will take what we consider to be the top 15 to 20 candidates that have applied, and we will interview them ourselves before we present them to any of them to you. And during that process, we'll do some executive due diligence in relationship to their background and their employment history. Because what we want to do, while, as Bob stated, you'll have access to all of this in our portal. You can see every single candidate, every single application, every document they submit. At some point in our process, we're going to be presenting to you who we think are the best candidates for you to consider to be the next superintendent based upon what we've learned from your community and who's applied. And we will do that after we've had a great opportunity to screen, interview, and conduct a reference check. Next slide, please.
So briefly, in this select phase, Dave and I will be your associates. We'll be responsible for and supporting the school board in all phases of this process. So as we're looking at the interview process, we'll be with you, obviously, through the semifinalists and the finalist process, on-site, and managing the logistics of the interviews and help with debriefing interviews. So we'll present you a slate of candidates. As David mentioned, we do some pre-screening and some due diligence before we bring you a strong candidate pool. And that'll obviously the number of candidates will be determined by the board. We'll conduct an interview workshop with the board and provide materials and protocols for the interview. We'll schedule all the interviews with for the board with candidates. We'll facilitate the board discussion to narrow down the candidate pool on each round of interviews. And then we'll coordinate the most important piece, I think, at the end with a third-party independent investigation background on all of the final candidates that we have moving forward. And then obviously being with the board through the hiring and the contract phase of our agreement.
Next slide, please. So one of the things that we will also do is we won't just say, hey, congratulations, you've hired a really sharp candidate, but we'll be there to help through the transition. We'll meet with the appointed superintendent and the board, try to set some governance protocols with you. And then if the board and the superintendent are interested, there's a lot of other things that we could do once the search has been completed, such as board governance workshops, superintendent goal setting, strategic planning, et cetera. Next slide, please.
So as we mentioned in the beginning, this is simply a draft calendar of how we might approach a search for your district. In that pre-planning meeting with the board, if we're selected, obviously these dates and the way that we've organized it can be arranged to meet the board's needs. If the board would like to certainly speed up this timeline, we could look at doing that. Certainly the input phase from the community is probably the most time-consuming piece. So looking at the number of groups that we are getting input from and how we want to organize that, we're certainly open to suggestions from the board to come up with a finalized calendar for moving forward. Dave, any other comments on that?
No, just really just wanted the board to be able to see that a really comprehensive search can be conducted in the time prior to the end of this school year. So, and our last slide is questions. So hopefully we did it close to 10 minutes. How'd we do, Kirk?
I think we're a little over, but.
Okay, love to answer any questions.
Trustee Land, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Gentlemen, I appreciate the presentation. I have a couple questions. One is, you know, I've been on other boards and we've used your services, HYA. The final meeting with the board, what does that look like? I remember there was a specific thing that we used to do, and I'm not sure if you guys still do it, so I'm curious.
Well, the final meeting before the superintendent begins.
Usually it's the three semifinalists and that one.
Yes. So traditionally what we have done is had the candidates spend a significant amount of time with the board. And sometimes that's over a meal, whether it's lunch or dinner. And it would also include the opportunity for the candidate to spend time with 2 board members, maybe touring the school district and the community, so that you can have a much more informal interaction with the candidates. We've had some boards that have said, well, we really don't want to do that, and we want to go through a more traditional process. But interestingly that you bring that up, because we've also found that potential bonding experience with superintendent candidates becomes very, very important. And so that's traditionally what we do.
Yeah,
Thank
Dave,
you.
I would chime in that I think that certainly since COVID, since we've been doing searches since COVID, that has been out. But prior to that, I find it really a useful time for the board to have an informal discussion with and get to know candidates, sit across the room with them and have be able to break bread and get a chance to know them outside of a formal interview process and get a feel for whether you want to try this person on and whether they're a good fit.
Thank you. That's kind of my thinking too. So I'm glad you're still doing that. What about, is it possible to alter the process, like make a change at some point in time or get our input? Like maybe the board wants something just a little different. Is that something that you can accommodate or would take into account?
I would say that that happens in almost every search that we've done. Something comes up in the process of a search where we're asked to adjust. And of course, we will do that within, our ability to do that, obviously. Dave?
Yeah, this is your search. This is probably, other than evaluating superintendents, the most important thing that a board does is figure out who that next superintendent's going to be, to join the governance team and be one of the leaders of the school district. So we will do whatever it takes to make sure your needs get met during the search process.
I think you've answered this one already, but you don't use a pool of candidates per se that would come into our, you're going to actually look and recruit newly for our search compared to maybe picking a group that you had in the past and use that. So you've already answered that. It's mine, but I just want to affirm that. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. That's very much a difference from other search firms.
Last question. So what if, because I noticed you said we have 15 to 20 interviews that you do informally in advance before we go to the next level. What if you present those names to us and we say, no, we want to alter that or change that or go back? Is that possible?
Absolutely. It's your search.
Okay.
That's why the portal is so important for us, so that you can see everything that's happening. It's complete transparency, no secrets whatsoever. We're just going to give you our best thinking, our rationale, why we pick the candidates we think make the best match. And ultimately, it's going to be the 5 of you that are going to make that call. So absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Trustee Elise Dwyer.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation. I did read it ahead. I have 2 questions. One, you said that you use traditional media, and you didn't exactly say what traditional media was. So could you tell me what traditional media is?
Yeah, we'll advertise in all the social media that the board feels comfortable advertising in. We'll advertise in the AXA publication, EdCal, where most people go. We'll advertise in CALSA, CASA. We'll advertise if the board decides it wants to do a national search. We would certainly recommend advertising in Ed Week as well.
Just to add on to that, we're also obviously will be on our HYA job opportunities, which would be a nationwide look at that position.
I have one other question, and that is, now I'm forgetting my question. If we want a national, if we decide we really want a national search, will that add time to the search? Would that change the calendar much?
No, we have associates in every state. And if HY is selected as a search firm, even if you say, well, we were really only interested in California people, every associate in every state will be informed of this, because we have California superintendents who have left the state and become superintendents in other states who may be deciding to come back to California or looking to come back to California, and our associates may know those people. So yes, it wouldn't change the timeline.
Could you just tell me approximately what percentage of your searches are done are California versus the rest of the country?
I would say probably 80% California only, and 20% are national. I just
Okay.
completed.
That makes sense.
I just completed a search for the largest urban school district in California, and that was a national search, resulting in a candidate from Florida.
Yeah, and I think we just finished Moraga together, and
Okay.
that was probably a 90-10.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Griffin.
A couple questions. One of them will actually build on Trustees Lee's Dwyer question. What are the pros and cons of doing a national search? You've identified your resources. What are the trade-offs if we decide to do that, as opposed to a California-based only?
Well, the cons might be that you might have a candidate that's not as familiar with California-centric law, which in the past was probably much more problematic than it is currently, as the differences between various states has really, the delta between states has really reduced significantly over probably the last decade or so, in relationship to school funding, in relationship to curriculum and instruction. The advent of the internet has made information sharing and understanding significantly more homogeneous. So that would be probably the only thing, would be that you might have a candidate that isn't as familiar with California.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's no mystery that living in certainly in your area and our area, up in the Bay Area, it is not an easy proposition to buy a home and live here successfully. So knowing that each of the candidates, should you decide to do a nationwide search, that each of them have their eyes open about the community, what it costs to live here, and all the components to being and living in the Bay Area, I think is important information. Should the board decide to go nationwide, that we don't lead you down a road with 3 or 4 or 2 people that have no idea. Certainly they should have done their research, but I think it's an important piece that they understand the community and the cost of living if you're moving from another state.
The second question, and actually I think we went down that road several superintendents ago, because Peter and I were doing some traveling. But the second question is, how deep do you think the pool is going to be this year? Do you think we'll have any difficulty with the number of qualified candidates in California? Or do you know?
Well, here's what I would say. Last year was the record number of vacancies for the superintendency in California. And this year there'll be more than last year. And so the issue that you don't face, that other districts do face, is your district is a very attractive district to go and be part of. You have, obviously Bob and I did a little research. Bob, because he's close by, didn't have to do much, but you have a board that's committed. You have a board that's interested in student success. The first thing that any candidate asks us is, what's the board like? And so there will be districts that will not have a deep pool of qualified candidates, but San Mateo will have a deep pool of qualified candidates. People want to come and work with you.
Thank you.
Trustee Zuniga.
Thank you. Hello, I'm new to this whole process. This is my first year on the board. I've had experience in searching for CEOs of other types of organizations, but never in education. But my questions, I guess, are, what sets you apart from other search firms that we will be talking with tonight? And also, as you know, our school district is very, very diverse, and it's, it's not a surprise that we'll probably side towards more diverse candidates. What strategies do you use to be able to identify the most, I guess, the most similar candidates to what, we would be looking for? And like, how do you prepare your firm, to have more knowledge about, diversity, inclusion, equity, all of that stuff? How does your firm keep up with all of the changes that are happening in our world?
Well, I'll start by saying something that I don't always say to boards of education that are in Northern California, and that is I am the chair of the Education Doctorate Leadership Program at the University of Southern California, USC. My dean is Pedro Noguera, who is a well-known social justice, educational equity advocate. All the work that we have done, and our prior dean, Karen Gallagher, as well, was focused on changing the lives of historically marginalized students and communities and their families. So we, myself and Bob and our firm, have a deep understanding of what diversity is, what it means to a community, and how best to find the leadership that's going to take schools and school districts to where they need to be in providing for every student that walks through every school door. So our firm itself has done a lot of work. We've published white papers on the importance of ensuring equity in our schooling and our school systems. We've looked at systemic racism, and it's been something that's been instrumental, not just in our firm's work, but I can speak for myself and for Bob, but in all the work that we have done in our careers as superintendents and once we've retired.
So I thank you for that question. I would add that through my coaching and through my last several years of experience at the Los Gatos High School District, I've been really integrally involved in ethnic studies and equity issues before I left, and equity issues across our high schools. As you know, high school districts are unique to any other district, be it elementary or middle. Each of those high schools that you have is basically a separate city and a separate city state. And it's a very interesting, complex process to manage that as the school board and as the superintendent. So where I would come in a way that would really help you in the search is having that understanding of what to look for in someone to run a high school district. And I appreciate the question about being able to being alert to the fact that that we have a lot of issues in this state and a lot of issues locally in all of our districts that have to be addressed. So certainly moving forward, that would be something that Dave and I will certainly be working with you to attract the best candidate pool.
And I have no doubt that we would bring to you a very diverse recommended candidates for you to interview based upon your district and the candidates that are most likely would be interested in being part of your governance team.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the downside of being the last person is most of the questions I had have already been asked. But I do have a couple. Could you give me an idea of maybe the percent of superintendents that are still in the job after 5 years or so? Do you keep track of that data, or
Yes,
maybe even after 10 years?
I can say for HYA, we have 78% nationally of our superintendents that we have worked with boards to place in school districts are there 5 years later. In California, it's 86%.
Okay. Good.
We don't have 10-year data, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, 5 years is pretty good. The attrition rate for superintendents is usually fairly high. Okay, thanks. And I don't think you mentioned like a guarantee. Was there a guarantee program policy if, for instance, a superintendent packs up and leaves after a year? Is there
Yes.
is there something you come back and help us find another one?
Absolutely, yes. For any reason. If you don't like the superintendent and she doesn't like you and leaves, then we come back in and conduct the search.
Okay. Okay. And for how long a period is that? Is that a
During
year?
the first year, we do it free of charge. After that, we'd come in and work with the board and probably conduct a pretty modified search unless there was a significant change in district circumstances that would require a full-blown input gathering. Then we would conduct a full search.
Okay. And I guess the one other, I wanted to just get a little more information on the California versus national. My personal view is that I would want to hire somebody that had California experience. I mean, they might be working right now outside of California, and I'd be open to that, but I'd be hesitant to bring in somebody who had never worked in California, because I think we're still pretty weird in our ed code and have a lot of kinky stuff in there. So I guess, is there a way of kind of modifying the search so that if we wanted to do a national search that was looking for only people who had California experience working outside of California?
Absolutely. I did a search 2 years ago in Oregon, where that's exactly what they requested. They wanted somebody who had familiarity with Oregon, but they wanted a national search, and we just posted the job that way.
Okay.
And they hired somebody that was currently a superintendent in Idaho, but had been a superintendent in Oregon prior to that.
Okay. 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 Does anyone else have any last questions? I don't see any other hands up. Thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Who's next, Mr. Black?
Leadership Associates.
Leadership Associates, okay.
Turn the page, get ready to write down the next stuff.
Well, we know this person.
You sure do. But I know you too.
I just want to ensure that there isn't anyone else coming for you with leadership. I have the two of you.
Peggy's coming. Where's Peggy? Peggy Lynch?
Or Margaret Lynch?
Margaret Lynch. There you go.
I don't see her, but I have an odd email address. I don't know if she'd be using her leadership email address that you provided me.
Probably. Let me text her.
Okay, you're gonna text her. She says she can see us.
I haven't received anything back yet from her. Blanca, do you have anything?
I'm asking her what email address she's
Yeah.
using. That might be the issue.
But she can see us, right?
That's correct. That's what she said.
I don't see her in the attendees list.
She says she's using P. Lynch at Leadership Associates.
I apologize. I
seen
don't
us.
see her.
Should we have her sign off and then try to come back in?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I know that she can hear us. It's just,
But we can't hear her.
right, we can't see her.
You would think after all the years we've been doing this, it would be smooth as silk, right? And it never seems to go that way when you most want it to.
Well, we're still leaving ourselves mute and forgetting to
I know.
unmute ourselves, no matter what.
I think there should be a universal signal for your mute, you know, something like. Now, this isn't taking out of our 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
Come on, Linda.
Now no, it's just, you're gonna have to talk really fast. I'm just
There we
kidding.
go.
I've been known for that. Don't worry about it.
She's connecting, it says.
All right.
So Jackie, I have to ask, is this a new position for you? A new company?
It is. You know what's real interesting? You know, those other people who were just
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make, my head was like, wait a minute. Okay.
There's
Good.
Peggy right there.
All right.
they were my training ground, Greg.
Well,
Now
I
I'm
know
in the
you're
big
busy.
time.
Jackie, I know you're really busy because where I work, I hear you're I hear you're down in Los Altos area too.
I actually was just there this afternoon, to tell you the truth.
I actually knew that.
Truth is a good thing.
President Ham, I
Okay,
believe
here
we have
go.
everybody now.
Okay, I think your whole team is there. Yeah, it was Peggy.
Hi there, how are you?
Okay.
There she is.
Good. It's good to see
Why don't you just launch into it?
Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I apologize for that because I could hear you just fine. I don't know why, but it didn't work. So yeah, we can go ahead to the second slide. We'll spend just a couple minutes on introductions and then kind of launch into the presentation itself. Obviously, I'm Peggy Lynch. I've been with the Leadership Associates in 2008, so have done well over 60 plus searches or more. Was in San Diego Union High School District and Brea Linda, and of course I worked with you before on 2 other searches before this. So I'm happy to be back and see all of you, and I'm excited that 3 of you are still on the board. I don't know if you are, but I am. Blanca?
Hi, I'm Blanca Cavazos, and most recently I was the superintendent of Taft Union High School District in the Central Valley, well known for our oil and ag in that area. I am currently the co-director of the ACSA, Association of California School Administrators Principal Academy, but I've been in education for almost 40 years, about 30 of them in administration, and I was in one of the largest high school districts in California for 22 of those years in the Kern High School District, and then spent 9 years in the Taft Union High School District as well. I've worked with elementary and secondary as far as teaching and administration. I've worked with high school and adult ed, and I've also taught at the university.
Hi, and Thank you. And a number of you, actually, Greg, Linda, Peter, Robert, Trustee Zuniga, who was new when I first started working with you folks on Kevin's evaluations. You know me, Jackie Horsch. I was a superintendent for 9 years in Union School District on the west side of San Jose. I've been doing superintendent searches for 6 years. And the reason Greg and I were laughing was that I was formerly an HYA associate, and now I'm with leadership, and I can't wait to tell you why you should hire us instead of them. But that's another slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide.
So I just want to quickly show you this slide, because this is actually one of the reasons that I feel it's so important for a district to be working with us, because we have an administrative support team. What that means to you is that there's going to be someone who is assigned to your search and is going to work really closely with your administrative assistant. So a lot of the burden of setting things up, making sure that your postings are when they should be, doing all of the advertising, a lot of that logistical legwork tends to fall on the consultants in other companies, but not for us. We really spend our time doing the recruiting. We spend our time doing the reference checking and really making sure that our job is focused on what's most important and finding you a good leader. I cannot even begin to tell you how important it is to have an executive assistant who works with us, that's assigned to us and to you, answers any questions really and truly almost 24/7, maybe 24/6. So it's a really important thing to have, and I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. So obviously, Peggy and I both know the district. She has done searches before, and I've been with you for the last, I think this would be our 6th year, talking about what you've done, great things that Kevin has accomplished, areas that you still need to work on. I think that's important as we look at that next superintendent, to really be able to see what is the, what are they bringing to the table that's going to move the district to that next level. So a lot of these things you should be very proud of, and certainly, things like your GO bond, having been passed, what you've done with the middle college program, the whole Design Tech High School chartering agency ability. And I think the way that you were able to deal with the pandemic over the years has also been very successful. So as I know you've heard before, you're a very, very desirable district. You're going to have a very deep, highly qualified pool. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to work with you on this if we can. Next slide, please.
So just quickly, we are, of course, a California firm, and we don't do searches necessarily outside of, we don't do searches typically outside of California. However, we've done well over 600 in California. We think we know the state of California well. All of us who are doing searches are deeply involved in activities and connections around the state. And we, but that being said, we've also placed a lot of candidates from outside of California. So if it's the desire of the board to have outside candidates, we have a lot of people who check our website constantly to know what we're doing and are looking for positions. Either they want to come to California or they've been here and want to come back. And so we are always open to those kinds of candidates and do a lot of conversations with people outside. So that's important to us to keep doing, to know that we have that ability to get outside of California, as well as lots of candidates in California. And like I said, and Jackie said, this is a very desirable district. You never have trouble finding good people for your pool of candidates. Next slide. So this is kind of just an overview of the kinds of reach that we have. I think, Blanca, you're going to cover that one, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as you look at where our partners are located throughout California, it gives you a picture of just the reach, as Peggy said, the reach that we have, the connections throughout the state, and experiences which are very valuable in gathering information regarding the candidates, being able to recruit candidates, because each of these individuals that are listed here are successful, have been successful superintendents, are well recognized throughout the state. If we can go to the next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the different organizations, associations that we remained connected to. That shows you basically the connectedness that we have, the reach that we have, and that allows us to, again, recruit and also to gather information regarding the candidates so that we have the most reliable information that we can get in order to bring those candidates forward to you. And then I think we're skipping the next slide. Next couple of slides, if you will.
I think just a note that that's there and they can read that, sure.
Yes.
And Jackie, I think we want to talk a little bit about our professional development work that we do across the state. You want to comment on that?
I do, because honestly, I do think this is another one of those really important things that differentiates us from any executive search firm that I'm aware of. We have, we're 100% committed to developing leaders and to continuous development. It's in our DNA, continuous improvement. We do believe that the best thing that we can do in terms of helping districts find highly qualified candidates is for us to be providing as many professional development opportunities and networking opportunities for aspiring superintendents who are already in the seat. So we do an enormous amount of work with our superintendent leadership academies. We have a Santa Clara County Superintendent Network where the superintendents can get together and share ideas, talk about strategies that they're using that are more effective than maybe what someone else has thought of. So it's a really important thing for us to have these engaging professional growth opportunities. And as I said, we also do, board governance workshops and other things, but being able to provide learning opportunities for people who are being challenged every day by new things, I think really sets us apart from other search firms.
Next slide, please. So the why us, I think a couple of things. Jackie pointed to one of them. I think that we are all partners or associates in the firm. We are not hired consultants. We all have a vested interest in the success of our organization. We think we provide a very broad and deep pool of candidates. I think in our letter, we talk about the percentage of people who stayed and the percentage who are of minorities and or women. We've done this right? We have about, I think it's 67% of our finalists who are women or candidates of color in the last 2021. And so those are things that we're really proud of. And with well over 600 searches within our organization, I think we do a good job. I think Jackie says we're the premier search firm. We like to think we are, but we also feel like we work really hard at making sure we are. So next slide, please.
And this is what I was referring to, Peggy. Do you want to
go ahead? Go ahead.
Well, this just, talks a little bit more in depth with what I was referring to. This is just a sample of the kinds of things that we're currently doing. So I talked about the superintendent leadership series that we're having 7 already in California with 180 districts participating. So we have a huge network of people with whom we're familiar that are working together. And that really does help us as we're looking for your next leader. The networks that we're doing, 47 districts are participating. And then, of course, for aspiring superintendents, we have our Assistant Supes Leadership Network, as well as all kinds of other things. So just again, to show you that what we do is very different. We aren't just a search firm. We're a firm that's really building executive leadership for education. Next slide, please. Blanca?
This cycle describes what the process is, but most certainly the most important part is number one, is that the search begins and ends with you. This is really, in my eyes, the most important decision that you make because it sets the tone in the future for the district. And so when we meet with you to find out what it is that you want in a candidate. And then we also get that stakeholder input, and you direct us as far as who it is that you would like for us to gather that information from. And we've already talked about our extensive recruitment. I think one of the things that we did not mention was that we have a distribution list of administrators who have gone onto our website and put their name in there, that are constantly getting these notices of the openings that are there. So in addition to the actual marketing, if you will, and advertising of the position, we're also advertising by getting that out to them. And then lastly, we rank exactly why we believe these are the top-notch candidates, but at all times you have the ability to look at all of the candidates and indicate which ones you want to interview. Next slide.
I'm not sure that we have used the online survey as much before, but that's become a huge tool for us in terms of getting out to the community and to staff to be able to give input without necessarily coming to meetings, particularly given all the things we've been going through, obviously, with COVID. So that's been a really huge tool for us.
And it's also increased the participation of certain facets of the community as well.
Next slide.
This is our proposed timeline when it comes up. At least it's not up on mine yet, which we will use and we will finalize with you, with your input. And you are really at a perfect place, a perfect time in which to begin this search, because this is prime both recruiting and hiring season. So you are at a great place, but you will be working with us in telling us what dates fit your needs best, with the goal of having that done by May and that candidate starting on July 1st.
Next slide, please. So just a couple closing thoughts. First and foremost, our search is going to be your search. We customize the search to meet your needs. We ask you, how do you want your candidate selection process to be? Do you want, how long do you want it to be? Do you want it to include a site visit? Do you want do you want to have the opportunity to break bread with maybe two of your finalists? Whatever it is that you want in this search is what we're going to do. And I highlight that because our fee is all inclusive. We don't say we guarantee 4 days. You get us for whatever it's going to take to get you the leader that you want. So I think that's a very important thing to highlight in terms of a closing thought. We've already talked about the importance of having an administrative assistant who's dedicated to your search, working with us and with you. We mentioned the survey, and I have to tell you that it's been extremely successful in terms of not only getting input, and we get hundreds of comments from people who take the survey, but it's really helpful, I think, for board members to see that disaggregated. So first and foremost, you can see what are the patterns that seem to be real common among all groups, but also then you're able to see, well, wait a minute, where are those outliers? Why does this group think this, but that group thinks something different? And you're really able, I think, to gain a great deal of information from that. And as both Peggy and Blanca mentioned, we're an experienced California firm, but we do have a national reach, especially if your interest is in getting someone who has California experience. Many people, candidates who go to other places in the state who've lived in California, they've taken jobs out of state, but they want to come back to California. They're all in our Leadership Associates website. And every time a position comes up, they're aware of it and they know it. I also want to point out our guarantee, which is much better than other firms' guarantee. So if we place a candidate and the candidate leaves within 2 years, And the majority of the board is still there, and there have been adequate mid-year and end-of-year evaluations. So, no surprises. We will do the search at no cost except for advertising expenses. No other firm does that. And take a look at what's happened recently in some other neighboring districts about other firms' guarantees. I will leave that and then open it up. Next slide, please. Are there any questions?
Trustee Land.
I'm pretty quick on the hand these days. Ladies, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I do have a couple questions. I think, Jackie, you really answered the one that really concerns me, but I want to reiterate it because I think it's important. One of the things that I found significant, I've hired 3 superintendents, and I found one of the most important things from a board perspective is the idea of that informal time with the semifinalists and those last candidates, and other organizations may do this. So I would like to see some time included in this process, especially at the end. I'm glad you said it starts and ends with the board, but at the end, I'd like to have some informal time because that bonding can really develop where we go with goals and where we go in the future. So is that possible? Is that something? I just want to make sure that I guarantee on that one. Yes, absolutely. Okay, excellent. My next question is, and this is more of a concern though, it feels like, and I'm kind of have my ear to the ground, that this organization kind of uses pools of candidates. You mentioned all those organizations and they seem to have a connection. And I'd like to see not just recruitment from within your organization and the relationships that you built, but outside as well. Is that something, how can I make sure that that's going to happen
So I'd like to just say, having been in this organization for a very long time, we get accused of that regularly. And it's just not true. It just simply is not. Our pools vary from all over, and they're not, we belong or we are connected to those organizations, but our candidates don't all belong to those organizations.
Okay, so I guess my question is, because, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. But okay, how am I going to guarantee that it's not going to be just your usual, like a typical group of superintendents who've been superintendents from different areas in California? And, how is it going to be diverse? That's my question.
Either anybody else can respond, but my experience has been that we just simply have such a diverse pool of candidates in there from all over. Some we've never met. I'm doing a search right now in Fountain Valley, which is a very outstanding district. We have 35 applicants for that district. Of the 35, I might know 5 of them. So it's a very, and there's only 2 partners, and between the 2 of us, we might know 10. So it's not, I know we get accused of that, but it's just not the case. So
okay. I appreciate your honesty.
Put it in writing.
I appreciate your honesty and candidness. My follow-up question to that is, what about unorthodox recruitment? I mean, what about candidates who are not kind of fitting the mold of they've been a superintendent or they've had certain experiences? How can we recruit from maybe within or from outside that is just doesn't fit the mold kind of thing? How does that work? And do you do that?
We have. In fact, I just did a search for actually it's a ROP, but it's a superintendency. And this gentleman came from a private industry thing and who happens to have a great interest in technical education. So it was, he's not somebody that anybody would have known through a superintendency or even an assistant suit, because that's not his background. But the board loved him and he was perfect for them. So we usually, we advertise enough and it's on our website. We have lots of interesting people check our stuff. What we tend to find sometimes though is it's really hard sometimes if they haven't done anything in public education to know how systems work. But that it happens, and we don't get governors applying like LA Unified might, but that doesn't mean we might not. But
right, yeah. No, totally. Thank you. I get it. My last question. This one has to do with more focus groups. I know you've said the power of the online survey, which I think is great, and getting that data is really important. But one of the things I'm concerned about is our local organizations like DLAC, like ELAC, and it really sometimes online is not going to be the way we access information from them. So how are we going to ensure that we're going to have those kind of in-person meetings that we can do?
Jackie, anybody can talk, Jackie.
Well, we can all chime in, and hopefully it was in the proposal. We spend an enormous amount of time working with you to identify which stakeholder groups you want us to meet with, to get input from. So if you were to choose us, the first thing we have is an initial planning meeting. And we will give you a list of, I believe it's about 28 of what we call the usual suspects, right? It's your DLAC and your ELAC and you know, of course, your unions and your teachers and your classify. I mean, so we'll go through that list and you identify who are the stakeholder groups that you want us to get input from. And then if there's someone that's not on the list, and really and truly, it does depend on the district. So one district we did recently want us to interview the 2 previous superintendents. So we'll do that. We'll get input. Another district I worked in wanted us to interview the sheriff. So we will do that. So really and truly, it's up to you. Who do you feel is important that we ask to get input from? And some of it may not have as much to do with the input that you're needing as much as it is making sure that that person or those groups feel included, that you are cognizant of their voices.
And I would also say you have the best knowledge of what works best for which groups. And so
Right.
That's where we would ask you, you know, how best can we reach out to those groups? And you may tell us, this group really doesn't do online very well, so they need an in-person meeting. That's the kind of information that we will be gathering from you. And that's why I say it begins and ends with you, because you really are driving this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trustee Griffin.
Couple of questions. Thank you for your presentation. That timeline, is that a typical timeline? Because it looks really aggressive. Because I think you have things starting like next week or the holiday or something. So how realistic is that timeline?
Well, I still think we can, you know, again, we're flexible based on your needs, but we definitely think there's no problem getting somebody by July 1. So if, for example, and I think we looked at this a little bit, but if your spring break falls at a certain time and we can't do something, we can shift. But I don't see us having, a combination is one, I don't think we're having trouble attracting candidates. So if we get the search, it'll be on our website as soon as we know that. And we send out a blast saying the job is open, and we start getting requests for candidates, you know, requests for applications like right away. But I think I don't personally see a real challenge on the timeline, but I think we have some wiggle room on it because that still means that they can start by July 1. The one challenge is always that you must approve the contract at a regularly scheduled meeting. So you work around that schedule rather than just, you can't call a special meeting to do it. Mm-hmm. So we tried to kind of play with that. Jackie?
I also wanted to add that a lot of this timeline is totally dependent on you, because there are, you know, like when we present the candidates, you all have to be there. So, I mean, we really do try to make it flexible so that it meets your needs of when you're going to be available to meet with us as well. So it's proposed. It's something that we're looking at. And if we were to get the contract, when we meet with you, we ask you to please bring your calendars. And that's when we actually solidify the dates.
And we start with the end in mind, and the end being them starting on July 1 and the contract being approved at a regular board meeting. It could be in June, but that's a real short timeline for someone to basically start the job.
Got 2 more questions that are kind of tag onto there. And I think you made Peggy, you may have made the comment that you may know if you had 25 or 30 candidates, you may know 10 of them because you use other sources. So how do you really get to know these people that aren't the usual suspects? How do you get their background? How do you find out how they were doing at their last district?
Right. And that's part of why all of the other people listed on that map showing where we all are, all of those partners, I may not personally know them right away, but 3 of my partners might know them. So we use them as a part of our resource. Plus, we all have connections to other organizations and can find out a lot. You know, I think we've got enough background of really vetting candidates to know when we can go to sources that they may not tell us about as candidates. And we work really hard at making sure that part's done well. That's important to us. But yeah, we don't have, I think we have a good track record of really getting at all the different kinds of candidates. I just met a gentleman who's applying for Fountain Valley. 3 weeks ago. He's a great candidate. He works in my area. So we got together and talked. So we do that. Sometimes it's a Zoom conversation. Sometimes it's just, we already know them or other partners know them. But we spend a lot of time on that because that's the most important part we do.
And if I could maybe add to that. So again, one of the things that's really differentiates us is our partners, all 15 of us, we have an every other week meeting. In addition to, we probably email and text each other at least 5 times a day for different candidates, because people know people, right? And so even though we vet the candidates by going, taking a look at their references, as well as the people that we know in those districts where they may have worked, we know that our partners, we actually say, hey, tell me, I'm going to be, opening up this search and I have this candidate, who knows the backstory about this person. So we really try to go off the page, if you will, to find out information about the candidates, because it's important for us that when we present the candidates to you, that we know as much about them as possible. We also look, we try to check the media, social media, Google, all of that. So it's important for us that we are on top of understanding what that candidate is really about.
And on the application itself, there's a box that they check as to whether we can check references beyond the ones that they've listed. And obviously, if someone doesn't give us that authorization, that rings a bell for us.
One final question, and it kind of tags on to this. How important are site visits? And I guess, would you be recommending them, or how would you figure out when to recommend them?
Well, I think they're effective, Robert. I think they can be, it sort of depends on the candidate and where they are. Obviously, over the last couple of years with all the COVID stuff, people have done more of it via Zoom than they have maybe going to the place, but they want to do some follow-up with the candidate, with who they are there. So for example, it would be board members talking to other board members. It could be a union representative who talks to a union representative in in that home district. If we've done all of our work, which we work really hard at, there won't be any surprises, and it's really a validation visit to validate that this is the right candidate for us. Jackie or Blanca, want anything?
I would just say that it's been honestly 3 years since a district I worked with had a site visit, and it's just become less and less common. I think, as Peggy mentioned, you may want to talk to the board president of the district where the person's from, and you can do that by Zoom. You don't really need to go there. Sometimes the site visit, and I hate to say it this way, but it can become a dog and pony show. So, the candidate tells you who is their best friend, and you visit them and find out that they're the best person on earth. So, I think there are more effective ways of finding out about candidates.
Thank you.
So Trustee Louise Dwyer.
I only have 2 questions, actually. One, okay, my first question is, how many executive assistants do you employ?
We have 3, and we just are adding a 4th. So we have Becky Banning and Penny. Kyle, and we have Betty Hall, and then we are adding a new woman named Serena Farmington. Yeah, excuse me. So
Yeah, because you only had 1 on your slide, and I thought that given all the volume of work you're doing in California, I thought it'd be kind of a stretch to get much assistance from an executive assistant if you only had 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know?
On our slide, so there are 3 on
Yeah,
our.
well, the other people on it weren't executive assistants, so I just wanted to see,
Yeah,
like,
they all are.
kind of
actually.
understand the staffing. Okay, the other question I have is, you said you put a statistic in about 67% of candidates were women or candidates of color. Of those 67%, how many were hired? Do you know that?
I don't know off the top of my head,
Okay.
but
Because it's easy to make, it's easy to put people on a list to make them a candidate, but it's hiring them that I think really counts. So maybe
7% of finalists selected.
67% of finalists.
Okay. Can I chime in on that? Because I did a search recently in Orinda, and we were charged by one of the groups, we were challenged, I should say, to have at least 60% of the candidates be minorities, or women of color, or both. And we did it, we had that, but you know what, the board did not choose to hire a person of color. And so it wasn't, I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't that we didn't have and encourage a diverse pool. The decision of who to hire was not ours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess, the goal is to find the strongest candidates who are
Right.
women or people of color, so that pool is really robust. I mean,
Right. And honestly, that is what we tried. We had some extraordinarily talented and highly qualified people who were either minorities or women of color.
That's it. That's my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, let me mute my.
Trustee Zuniga.
Yes, thank you. You answered a lot of my questions actually already, but I'm really new to this. This is my first year on the board. And well, diversity is really important. Obviously in our district, we have such a diverse district, but then also, how do you keep up with changes within diversity and inclusion, all of that's happening now and in the future that will happen? And then also, say we do hire someone and they don't work out, what happens next?
You want to take that one, or?
Well, I think, first of all, I will just say, a lot of times diversity attracts diversity, and we do have a number of individuals that are very much involved with, and when you look at our group, the associations that we're affiliated with, we're actively involved. It's not, I'm a member and my name is on a list. It is, I'm actively involved. I will just use AXA for myself. I've been actively involved at the state and local level with AXA. I've, provide an academy for aspiring principals, et cetera. And so we are actively involved with a wide array of individuals. And I will just tell you that I am constantly surprised, and I shouldn't be surprised, but because of my background, I will have women and minorities that reach out to me and just ask me about positions, even positions that we are not involved in. So I think that the other pieces of that being actively involved is that those organizations are also on the leading edge of what is happening in California and in the nation. And so we're involved in presenting. Jackie mentioned the professional development that we do for the governance, for aspiring superintendents, for aspiring administrators. And so we do keep up with that. You can't provide that and not keep up with what is happening right now in the nation. Right now, if you're not keeping up with everything that's changing with COVID and the way that we deliver instruction, you're out. You're completely out.
And if I could chime in on that, I think one part of your question also had to do with, how do we attract candidates that are going to be more representative of, you know, the ever-changing demographic in districts. And one of the things that I don't know that we talked enough about, but when we meet with you and with the stakeholders, we're going to develop what we call that position description, where we really take all of the information that we're receiving about what it is you're looking for in a district and what your district values, what it's about. And candidates look at that. And if they're a candidate that's spent a great deal of time already, you know, invested in pushing forward a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, they're looking for that district that they can take to the next level. So they're looking for a match. And so as you know, as you start looking for your candidate that matches what you want, they're also looking for a district that matches their skill set and their passion.
Thank you.
Did you have any more questions?
No,
Lydia?
those were my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, but but you didn't answer if the candidate is not a fit. After
Jackie,
hire. Yeah, what happens next?
Well, so that's kind of where I talked a little bit about the guarantee, because I do think we have the best guarantee of most search firms. So if the candidate isn't a fit, and, you know, if you have done an adequate job of really, you know, letting the candidate know this is an area that we're not, you know, we feel is not showing sufficient progress. Here's what we expect by this timeline, you know, some metrics around that, not just, you know, they come to work one day and suddenly, you know, their desk is empty. But if, you know, if as a board, you've done the appropriate types of, you know, meetings with them, doing, you know, some evaluation on how they're doing, and the majority of the board is in place, then we will guarantee to do the search for the first, if it happens within 2 years. If, on the other hand, the candidate leaves and you haven't done those things, then, you know, we're not going to do that guarantee. But if the board has done due diligence in terms of, you know, really ensuring that it's been made clear to the candidate what's not working out, and the candidate has had an opportunity to try to remediate it, then we will do the search again, except for expenses, without charge to the district.
And we do some work within that first year to make sure those kinds of things happen. I mean, part of this is you want everybody to be successful. And so we want to be sure that they've been given a chance, and you've been given a chance to work with them and see that if something weird happens, we can always work with you within the first year to change things. So.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I wanted to ask I did work with leadership just last year on a search when I was chair at A Method Public Schools, the charter management organization that I work with over in the East Bay. And you guys did produce a diverse slate of candidates, and we actually did hire a Latina as the CEO of that organization. So I just point that out as something recent, and a recent experience that I had directly with you just last year. And it was during the height of COVID, and unfortunately, so it was a difficult time to do a lot of the things that you normally do. I think we had to do all of our interviewing with Zoom, which was less than perfect, but we did manage to do it. So I just point that out, that I've had that experience.
I think Linda has her hand up again or wanted something. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a quick question. When Peter has a chance.
Yeah. When I'm wondering, I've had particularly good experience with Phil Kwan. Is there a possibility, if we did hire you, could Phil join the team?
He may be able to help some. He doesn't, he has some health challenges and he doesn't drive anymore, but he certainly could be involved in some ways. And actually all of our partners are involved in different ways anyhow. So yeah, Phil's a great guy.
Well, and what I was going to say is I actually just worked with Phil yesterday and he mentioned, Peter, your experiences with the charter school. I, of course, had to drive him because he doesn't drive because of his accident, but he's one of our partners. And as I mentioned before, we all work together very, very closely.
The other question I had was your proposed fee is significantly higher than other proposals, and I'm just wondering, do you have any flexibility on your fee proposal if we were to select you?
It's interesting because it's actually less than we did for the last time, Peter.
Is it really?
Yeah. I went back and checked it, and we have some flexibility. Obviously, you could be a return customer, but and it's comparable to what we're doing with some other high school districts. And so, but we certainly can be able to talk with you about that.
Okay. Yeah, Linda, what?
I had a quick question. I just wanted to verify. Blanca would be part of the team, Jackie and Peggy, right?
Right.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I was wanted to do was verify.
Three strong women in this team.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think, Greg, did you have your hand up? Oh.
Okay. Any last questions or we move on? Thank you very much. This was very good.
Thank you very much. It's
Very
good to
good
see you.
presentation and exchange.
Everybody. Bye, Kurt.
Good to see all of you again. Take care.
Bye.
So McPherson, I think, is the last one.
Mr. Morayo is coming in now.
Welcome.
Hello there. Sorry about that. Didn't realize I still had my mute on. Good evening.
Welcome. You are a solo tonight?
I am solo tonight, yes.
Okay. Please proceed.
Sure. Well, as you've already mentioned, I'm Daniel Morel. I'm representing McPherson and Jacobson this evening. And if I could have the next slide, please. We are the exclusive search firm of the California School Boards Association. And as Vern Billy has indicated, is that the most important job you've got in front of you right now is hiring that superintendent, because it impacts, and a quote I use with the students that I teach at the university level is that the school district becomes the shadow of its leader, and the shadow that you want to cast is critical. As I've mentioned, I'm Daniel Morel. I am a former superintendent. I'm also a former state administrator of a school district that was put into receivership. By then, it was the State Department that did it. Nowadays, it's handled out of the County Office of Education. McPherson and Jacobson has a very strong belief system that our students deserve and are entitled to a very high quality education. And that's dependent upon the leadership of our schools. Thank you. I'd like to advance the slide. And so what our mission and our task with you would be to ensure that you are introduced to some of the highest quality educators, not only within the state of California, because McPherson and Jacobson is a national organization, but across the country. And we expand that as far as you would like to go. If I could have the next slide. We are one of the leading national search firms, and we have a national network of experienced consultants, both here in California and across the country. And the backgrounds and qualifications of these are from various California schools, national schools, and our consultants are folks who have worked in this case, California school systems. And we also have current and former school board members, which is actually one of the reasons I'm solo tonight, because originally we had asked a former board member to join me, and unfortunately at the last minute she had some conflict, so could not join this evening or this particular search. As I've already mentioned, the CSBA is in fact the selected representative to conduct these searches. Next slide, please. We as the firm don't hire superintendents. You as the school district, or you as the board do that. We are the recruiters of talent, and talent that matches what you are looking for in your next leader. And what we do is we guide you through the decision-making process. And at different times, there'll be certain things that you'll wrestle through, and our role will be to help you facilitate and move through that so that you ultimately have a candidate that you feel comfortable with and are ready to promote and move forward. We represent you as the board, and we work for you as the board. Part of what we benefit of having us is that, in fact, we get to be the shield between a lot of the politics that go on in this process, as well as what you as a board will experience. Try to be as transparent throughout the process, both with you as the board. You will hear from us regularly. We will have a weekly meeting with whoever our liaison is with the district, and keep you updated, as well as provide you information to provide to your community so they know what is happening. We do involve stakeholders. We do have stakeholder meetings. We will present you a list of potential groups to talk to. You would be asked to adjust that in every which way you believe is best. One of the strong pieces of McPherson and Jacobson is that we have a strong reputation of sustainability. Changing superintendents frequently is very disruptive to the educational process. And we're very proud of our sustainability rate. And I'll talk about that a little more in just a moment. If I may have the next slide. Okay, so, and here's the next slide. It talks about exactly what I was just mentioning. And that is that over 75% of the folks we have placed in the last 5 years are still in those positions. Over 50% in the last 10 years, and almost 50% for the last 15 years, which is significant. And again, part of what you want to do is be assured that you've got the candidate that will be with you and lead you along the way. Next slide. If you have the proposal in front of you, you'll see this mapped out in more detail on pages 7 through 14. It's a 5-phase process that we would guide you through. Initially, we'll start with the timeline, which, if in fact we're the selected firm, will start almost immediately. We'll be contacting you with a proposed timeline and target the date of July 1st to have your new superintendent sitting in their chair. We'll work with you to identify what criteria are you looking for? What do you want in the superintendent? What would you hope would be there? This would be part of our advertising that we would do so that the candidates are looking at exactly at who you want us to look at. And so we'd also talk to you in that first phase about advertising and how far, how broad you would like us to advertise. We clearly advertise in the California venues, EdCal, EdJoin, CALSA, CASA, etc. If you want to go nationally, we're connected nationally throughout the different states. Just prior to this meeting tonight, I was attending a meeting as a member of the National Superintendents Roundtable, which is another place where we can recruit folks from. Second phase of stakeholder meetings that I've already talked about and getting their input. We would develop the application with you as well as the advertising. We want you to look at that. We would have an online brochure that highlights your school district. And we would be in the process of recruiting. And then in the third phase, as we have the candidates, actually, as soon as we start getting applications, we start to evaluate and do reference check on the individuals. And our reference checks go beyond just what the individual puts on their application. One of the questions we will often ask somebody who is on their application is, who else should we talk to? And what that does is allow us to expand the network of folks that we are working with to check on the individual. And we also have a network that we know about. And some of the candidates, if they identify a school district that one of our consultants knows about, we will reach out to that school district and the supervisors there to do a reference check. With you, we would develop the interview questions and make sure we're asking the questions to get you where you want to be. Then with you in phase 4, we identify the candidates and determine who you will interview. And in just a moment, I'll talk about the different interview processes you may have. You see listed here is possibly a stakeholder interview as well. And then in this phase, we make the selection. And then the phase 5, this is the follow-up. We want your superintendent to be successful, and we want you to have somebody that you feel is doing the job you want him to do and working towards that. So we work with you to establish the performance objectives, particularly for that first year out. And we also guarantee that if within the first 2 years the candidate is not successful, and this can happen for a variety of reasons, and sometimes it's personal reasons and the candidate needs to suddenly depart. If it's within the first 2 years, we will come back and do the search. And the only expenses would be anything for travel and things like that. But otherwise, we would go through the process again. Next slide, please. Now, you have some choices on how you may want to do the interviews. You may do what we call the traditional board interview, and that's where you will, as the board alone, interview the candidates and the finalists, and then call back those that you are particularly interested in. Another option here, and actually this option we work in, a part of this option we work in the traditional mode anyway, is we do the board interview, but we also work in a time where you have informal time with your finalists, where you will sit down, maybe it's a cup of coffee, it might be over lunch, and just have some time to get to know the candidate on a more personal basis. Now, if you choose, we can also do the stakeholder panel as an interview. That's something we would talk about if, in fact, we're selected. Some districts have decided they want multiple stakeholder panels. And you see that we've had anywhere from a single stakeholder panel up to 5 different panels that a candidate to go through. It's not the one we would advocate for, but we have done that for some school districts. Next slide, please. So one of the critical pieces is all about equity, and McPherson and Jacobson is truly dedicated to equity policy and practice. And actually, that's how they actually tap me on the shoulder, because the work I do outside of doing superintendent searches these days is I am a consultant for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's because McPherson and Jacobson is committed to making sure that everybody is treated fairly, and we're recruiting a very diverse group of candidates for you. And as we go through that process, that all of these candidates are treated fairly and equitably. They all have the same opportunities to move forward. Now, while we don't represent the candidate, we do ensure that we are working with them so that they are fairly represented and that they're embracing a culture of inclusion and acceptance. Next slide. You saw in the proposal that the search is not to exceed $22,000. And it's actually, you were given a price of $16,000 for this particular search with those pieces that are included on this slide. The phases 1 through 5 4 weeks of advertising in EdCal, 60 days of advertising in EdJoin. 2, and sometimes this becomes more than 2, in-person stakeholder meetings. Now, in this world of the pandemic, we're finding that we're doing a blend. We are doing in-person and we are doing some FaceTime stakeholder meetings. I recently was on a search where the entire process was done online. And that was rather interesting, particularly being a former superintendent and wanting the board to really have an opportunity to get to know the candidate that they would hire, where we were limited to only being able to do it on the screen. Also, we will do some video interviews of candidates. We also spend some time in the reference checks, looking for criminal, financial, or credential verification. None of us included, want to be surprised. And so we dig deep and we go into the social media. We spend a great deal of time, once we've got some finalists identified for you, to assure that this individual is true to their word there. Your fee includes the travel expenses for 2 consultants, and then the different office expenses. And we have a very strong team in our office. It's a complete office operation. We have an executive assistant. We have somebody who just worked with us on handling the advertising, somebody who helps us with some of the other pieces as well. So we have multiple people in our home office that help support us. At the same time, we will ask you to identify our district liaison. I've had the good fortune to work with Shar before. And so she kind of knows our routine there. But we do need somebody to contact, because there's some things we just don't know about your district that somebody on the inside does need to share with us. Next slide. So one of the other parts of the service, if in fact you want to look at your job description for the superintendent, we will assist you in updating that and making sure it's current, it's representing what's true in today's world of education, and representing you as the school board. We will work with you in developing an effective contract that benefits both you as the school board and the candidate for the short term and the long term. Now, if you choose to do a visit to the finalist home community, we will assist you in setting that up, if that's what you as a board would so choose. Next slide. The big piece about this is it's all about our kids. It's all about our students. What ultimately, if the leadership, and that's the superintendent and the board, are in sync and working together, your students will benefit. And that's what this whole profession is all about. That's what we're working towards. What's the fit? Because when we as adults aren't in sync, our students pay the price. And so what we want to do is make sure you've got the candidate that benefits you the best. And the last slide there just gives our contact information if you want to reach out to us and have some other specific questions that maybe I did not address here. Your contract, as I already mentioned, does outline the 5 phases in a little more detail. And I could go over any of that if you'd like to choose. So let me see if there are any questions.
Trustee Dwyer.
So you may have answered this, but I've missed it. Who would be working with us in your organization? Is it you? Are you local? Actually,
I'm local. Actually, I'm just on the other side of the bridge. I live here in Danville, so I'm not too terribly far from you. As I said, just across the bridge. And as I said, we did have a school board member who was going to be with me as well. Just within the last 24 hours, realized that she had a conflict during this time period.
And who is that? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Well, the second person we haven't identified. The person we thought we had identified stepped away.
Okay.
But I would be
Okay.
your lead, and there'd be one other person. And
Okay. I've been suffering from unstable internet, so That's
Been there,
good,
done
yeah.
that. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Mhm.
Trustee Land.
Hi, so one of my questions was more about do you do an online survey? Because I know we're talking about other groups. You did a lot of talk about, stakeholder groups and, that sort of thing, which is great. But do you do an online survey or a wider outreach?
Yes, we do. We will have an online, and again, working with whoever you designate as the assistant, we will have a survey for online in addition to the meeting with the stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Griffin.
Actually, the first two questions from my trustees actually addressed a lot of that, but I'm not sure I followed your equity. And how do you deal with equity sort of in a diverse community? How do you do that? Your areas of key emphasis.
And again, what we do, all of us consultants are on call for any search that the company's doing here in California. And what we do is we reach out to specific organizations, specific colleges. We all are connected. And as I just mentioned, just prior to this meeting, I was at the National Superintendents Roundtable. So we reach out to specific organizations like CALSA, CASO, what have you, identify them. We also have folks that have applied with us before, or we have their names, what have you. We tap them on the shoulder. We go specifically, it's literally sometimes we're tapping people on the shoulder and say, this is a place where I think you may want to look at, because we cannot assume that a diverse group of applicants will just suddenly appear. We want to assure that when we're sitting down and looking at the finalists, that there is cross-representation of our very diverse state.
Thank you.
Trustee Zuniga. I think you're on mute.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I could not unmute myself. Along with Trustee Griffin's question, how do you stay abreast of all of the changes within diversity and inclusion and all of the different things that are happening in our world to be relevant?
Well, particularly around diversity, as I mentioned earlier, the other part of my life these days, and I was doing this prior to retiring from the superintendency, is I personally am a nationwide consultant for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm traveling about the state. I'm just one of several. The other person that was with me, she was also very aware of this issue, and she knows it from a board level as well. But what we do, and I have trained our other consultants in the organization on staying abreast of all of that. And we belong to organizations that promote that. One of my colleagues, the presentation I was listening to tonight, he has just written a book on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It'll come out in May, and that was his presentation this evening, is presenting that book to us. So we do everything we can to stay current, as well as being members and participates. Not when it's more than just being a member of an organization, but it's participating in organizations like CASA and CALSA, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. And what do you feel sets your firm apart from everybody else that we will be meeting?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I think we're very transparent. None of you as individuals should ever be wondering, so what's happening with that superintendent search? You will know that all the time. We will keep your community to the level that you are comfortable with, informed of where we are at all times. And I think one of the big things is our sustainability. I am very passionate, again, as a superintendent, a former superintendent, I have walked into districts that have been disrupted by multiple superintendents passing through at a time, at different times. Matter of fact, I just ended an interim superintendency. They had just had, within 3 years, 3 different superintendents. And that's just so disruptive. So I think one of the pieces that I particularly like about McPherson and Jacobson is our sustainability rate.
Thank you. And last question. So, okay, we went through the process, we hired someone and they didn't work out. What
Mhm.
happens next?
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it does occasionally happen. Matter of fact, I'm in the process of completing a search right now where unfortunately the person left after 3 years. We will come back after 2 years if that happens. And we will do the search again. The only additional expenses to you would be the expenses of travel for the consultants to and from your district. And, you know, with me being local, it's the bridge toll, which could be an arm and a leg these days, and the mileage is pretty much it.
Thank you.
So I appreciated your proposal. I thought it was very well done and very detailed. One of the questions I had, I would be interested in kind of reaching out nationally, but my personal view is I'd be hesitant to hire somebody who didn't have California experience. Could you expand maybe a little bit on how you might be able to identify people who might be working outside of California, but have California experience?
Yes, and part of that would be, again, is our network, and our network is not just those of us here in California. Because we're a national search firm, we have consultants across the country. And we also, you know, we don't just look for superintendents, we look for other CEOs as well. So we've got a variety of ways of how we can tap into our network. And as I said, while you have two faces in front of you throughout this process, you really have a very broad network of almost about 60 plus consultants who are in one way or another working with you in one form or another. So we reach out. We do know of folks who have left the state of California, have gone to other states, some wanting to come back in. We reach out, and even those who haven't indicated they want to come back to California, if we know about them, again, this is one of those times where we will tap them on the shoulder and say, you may want to come and look at this one. This looks like a good one for you and the district. You look like a good match. So we do a lot of tapping on the shoulders. And I think I mentioned earlier, well, we're constantly asking different references and things that the candidates give. Who else should we talk to? What that does for us also is broadens our resource of people to talk to as we do searches such as yours. You know, we now have a long list of people we could talk to about, do you have a candidate for?
Thank you. That's helpful. Any last questions before we move on? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. This is one of the most critical decisions you'll make, and I know you'll make the right one for you and your community. So thank you. Good night, Shar.
Thank you.
Thanks. So at this point, I would just ask if there is any public comment that anyone would want to make. You may raise your hand, and
I see no hands at this time, President Hanley.
okay. We can move forward with board discussion on making a decision. Is there anyone in particular that would like to start? I will start if no one else wants to start. I thought these were all, I mean, I don't think we would go wrong with hiring any of them. I thought they were very good. I thought they're very well qualified firms. I give the edge to leadership simply because I think they know us and we've worked with them before. And so I think that's a plus, and it gives us a kind of a running start. And I think they've done a good job for us in the past. And so I kind of come down on the side of working with Leadership Associates again. That's my initial take on it, because we've had a successful relationship, and the people know us, and we know them at least to some degree. So who was first? Greg.
Thanks. No, I'm glad you said that. I wanted to hear what you thought. I didn't want to jump in right away. So thank you, Peter. I asked a few major questions at really each group. I like the proposals of each. Peter, I really like that you noticed the prices, and I was a little concerned about that as well. So if we can make a deal, that would be kind of nice if that's what we do. My choice, just based on what I've heard today, was the first two. HYA, I felt I've worked with HYA in the past, and it's been very successful in Burlingame. I like their hands-on approach. I like that, they're very sensitive to what we're asking for. But I really liked Leadership Associates' presentation tonight. I think they have a lot going for them. I think they'll really make us a priority. And I think that's important, because I think we have some input that we want to make sure that this is an important. I think, this is one of the most important decisions, and I feel like they put a lot of their high-powered people on it, and I think that's worthy of my slant towards going for them. So my choice is either HYA or Leadership Associates.
Bob.
I think they were all good presentations. I think McPherson, I got the feeling that they were a little more national, a little less local, and maybe they weren't going to quite have the resources here. Now, in terms of HYA and leadership, I think we've dealt with both firms in some form or fashion. I did like the fact that Leadership Associates demonstrated that it knows the district. It's followed what we've been trying to do. I think we have some basis for some reasonable working relationships, and where we would be comfortable getting input or correcting them, and they would be attuned to, what we say, or knowing, well, we better go back and check with so-and-so, or what's the board going to think. So I think they could probably do the best job and give us a really personalized, search. Nothing against HYA. And actually, I all these charts started looking the same, because it looked like maybe the first chart when they presented it, it wasn't 2 or 3 key people. It was all the people in the state that had little dots on the side of them. But I think right now leadership would be my first choice, and then HYA.
Okay, Leah.
Yes, thank you. I liked the second and third, but the second was like my #1 choice over everything. I think they were very thorough. I like that they answered pretty much all of the questions pretty thoroughly, and that they know our district. I really liked working with Jackie when we worked with her before. I do like how diverse they are. I like how they were really strong in what they were saying. Not that the other two weren't, but I just felt like more confidence from them. Now, in terms of the pricing, I really want them, if they're going to do a really good job, I want to make sure they're compensated for what they do, because sometimes, you get what you pay for. But if there is a negotiation, that's great too. Yeah, so my first choice would have been the second. And then the third would be my second choice.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
It's interesting because I took voluminous notes for all of them actually. I really liked HYA, and I liked the portal concept where we could go in the portal, we can read about who's in it, who's, looking at the backgrounds and that kind of thing. I really thought that was a really good feature. Hi, Kevin. And I like that. I liked their 86% retention rate. I thought that was particularly good too. And I just thought that they gave a really good presentation. I would be comfortable with them. So when leadership came in, I was kind of like, well, okay, let's see what they have to say. Maybe it was 2 men presenting and then 3 women, which is different. Neither group was kind of mixed up. But anyway, the thing that Leadership Associates brings an energy to it. They do know us. They have a lot on their plate right now, which is why I asked them about how many assistants they had, because, oh, you'll have an assistant, and that's great to hear, except that they have a lot of searches going if you read the EdCal or whatever we're getting now. And so that means that they're all kind of stretched. And I had a little concern about, because they're so stretched and involved in so many searches, that they would be creating a pool of people and then just kind of sprinkling them out to everyone. And I really want to make sure that our search is individually focused on us, on our needs, on our district, on the composition of our district. I liked Blanca. She's new to the group, and I really liked her. I thought that she would be a great addition to this group. And I like, they are highly networked. I think at the end, and the fact that Jackie Horace, I don't know how you say her name, was at HYA and now is at Leadership Associates, I have to say that I feel like she might be bringing us the best of both, because she knows what they do well, and now she knows what leadership is doing well. So that might give us little extra energy and experience in this process. The one thing I think I'm kind of resting on Leadership Associates as my #1 candidate. I really would like the portal though. So, I mean, that'd be something we could ask them about. And I'm sure she's familiar with it. So that kind of concept, not that she's going to steal it from HYA, but I felt like I like that ability to, when you can, just go in and take a look at what's pending and who's out there. I'm a little more focused on somewhat of a national search than just California, because I think we really need to be more diverse. And I think in order to do that, we may need to go out of state. That won't hurt us. Maybe we wouldn't select someone from out of state because they may not meet all of the qualifications, but I really would like to see us reach out to see if we can identify strong people from other places who could bring us new ideas and new perspective. So that's it. Thanks.
Greg, you have your hand up?
Just to follow up, I think, some of my concerns about Leadership Associates is exactly what Penny and I obviously called them on it, and they know that what they do is sometimes have a list, a pool, and it kind of ties to what Linda was saying, that they have a lot of searches going on in California. I think it's important for us as a board to push them. I think what Linda's talking about, to make sure that it's a national search, is important, and that, Peter, I think your caveat to that, which is California experience, is important as well. So I think we could go with them. I think one of the things that I would push for, if we selected these Leadership and Associates team, I'd want them to really think about being unorthodox and being diverse, and not just going from their regular till to look for candidates. I would really push that. I think if they could do kind of a portal or some sort of system of communication like Linda's talking about, I think that's another push that I think we could do. So I'm content with going with Leadership Associates. I think they were the strongest. I think they're going to be the strongest team for us. I think knowing Jackie and having a relationship is important. I think we can push on that. So I think that's really critical. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Just to expand, just on my experience last year, was just to go back to Linda's point about the portal. They didn't call it a portal, but there was an online access to the candidates that they had recruited, and And in our case, I can't remember exactly how many candidates that they felt were, reasonably qualified. I think it was like 10 or 11 or something like that. We didn't interview 10 or 11, but there were 10 or 11 that they said, these are people that have qualified, and we were given access to their information and their resumes and their background and their assessment of the candidates. It wasn't called a portal, but it was an online access to it. And the candidates that they did recruit, I mean, some of them were clearly not out of a pool. I mean, some of them were more, could have been pulled out of a pool, I suppose, but some of them clearly were not traditional candidates. And that may be because they were recruiting for a charter management organization rather than a traditional superintendent. But I will just toss that out there anyway. That was my experience just last year.
Can I just add one thing? I really emphasize this in my question. HYA, one of the reasons why I did like them in the past in Burlingame for the elementary school district was giving that time to be able to meet the final candidates in a social or an informal setting was important, because it gave a lot of insight into who they were, and it really kind of solidified what the interview process did, because you got to see them in a different light. It wasn't as contextualized and formal, and you got to see who they were as people. And I think that led to some really longevity for both of the candidates that were hired. And I think that's something that we should consider. We are a highly functional board. I think that is one of our kudos to all of us. I think we are that. And I think we need to have a relationship. And we've said that to our superintendent a number of times, and he's been very good about that and how to connect. And I think we need that to really make progress in our goals and really look forward to where we're going to go in our district. So,
and we have done that as a board at least the last 3 superintendents that we hired.
Okay. Well, and I know Dave Pine
taking them to dinner or, taking them around the district.
Right. So I know because Dave and I were part of one of the hiring processes. So he kind of pushed that over to you guys here. So yeah, so definitely. Okay. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. So does someone want to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion to approve leadership associates.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion from Trustee Land, a second by Trustee Griffin. Trustee Griffin, how do you? Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga,
Yes.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we will go back and negotiate a contract with the idea of bringing a contract forward at next week's regular board meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There went our break.
Thank you to all of the firms that participated and gave presentations. They were all very good presentations, and we very much appreciate them. Do you want it like a 5-minute break before the public hearing? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 7:45. That's an 8-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are almost back. I don't know, is Legia back?
Yes, she is back.
Okay,
Yes, I'm back.
okay, great. So let's move to D2, which is a public hearing to review the trustee area maps for the establishment of trustee areas. Let me open the public hearing. Let me just preface it by saying that the board did decide on a tentative basis to select map 102, and with the fact that 103 and 103B were still possibilities. But all 5 board members had map 102 as their #1 choice last week at the February 10th meeting. But this is a public hearing to allow further comments on the maps. And I see we have 1 hand raised. If you want to bring that person forward,
I
I'll
brought her.
open the public hearing.
So, Mr. Hamley, we do have with us tonight Mr. Johnson and Mr. Barry Smith, and they do have a presentation prepared. I'm not sure what order you want to take tonight, but they are here and ready to present slides from Mr. Dr. Johnson.
Oh, okay. Let me have them present first, and then we'll take a public comment. I didn't realize that they had prepared a presentation.
Yes. So happy to appreciate the opportunity, and good to be with you again. So again, I'm Doug Johnson from National Demographics, and just going to focus on the 3 maps that, as you just described, have been the focus of the board. And we've got the maps and then a little bit more detail on the demographics that I'll walk through briefly here. So let me share my screen and we'll jump in. So as you just mentioned, this is an additional hearing that the board has added to gather public input after an extensive series of hearings already that started with sharing information, moved on to gathering and discussing draft maps. And now we're really down to the narrowing it down to the final stage here. As a quick reminder, as we've covered this at each of the previous hearings, federal law requires that each trustee area have essentially equal population with a very small margin of error in that. All the maps have to follow the Federal Voting Rights Act. And we also have to avoid racial gerrymandering. So race can be one consideration, but it cannot be what the courts call the predominant consideration. And the 3 maps before you tonight are safely comply with all 3 of those requirements. Where the decisions come down are in goals or traditional principles of redistricting listed on the right. And these are looking at communities of interest, trying to be compact. Obviously, we want the trustee areas to be contiguous, trying to follow easily understood, visible boundaries. You can, it's not a requirement, but you are allowed to try to have the trustees in separate seats. And I will note, none of the 3 maps that you focus on do that for everybody. You can, to a very limited degree, look at planned future growth. And then the other 2 considerations listed are redistricting ideas that don't really apply to districting, which is the first time of drawing maps. As you just mentioned, the board has tentatively selected map 102 at the last meeting. This map was drawn largely focused on the feeder districts that feed into the high school district. So you can see those feeder districts labeled in green here. And you can see San Bruno Park, Millbrae up north, with San Bruno Park in 1, Millbrae split between 1 and 2, Burlingame in 2, Hillsborough in 3. The San Mateo Foster City is actually a little bit in 3, and then in 4 and 5. So we've got a little mix, but each, to the degree possible, each trustee area is focused on a given attendance area. Draft 103 takes what we call more of a blending approach. You can see in particular trustee area 2 kind of swoops down the Bay Shore, picking up parts of a whole bunch of different feeder districts and attendance zones. Area 1 is more stretched out on the inland side of El Camino Real. And then area 3 is really the inland side of Burlingame High. And then Hillsborough goes over to the railroad tracks rather than El Camino Real. And then a little bit of Aragon High School attendance zone, with 4 and 5 down at the bottom, dividing Hillsdale and San Mateo High. Again, the attendance zone wraps around and gets some of 2, 3, 4, and 5. So as I noted at the start of the description of this map really focuses heavily on El Camino Real as a clearly defined boundary, but there were some concerns raised about there's already a sense of, us versus them, hills versus Bay Shore, that focuses on El Camino Real. So maybe there's a desire not to reinforce that in these trustee area lines. So draft 103B is generally similar to 103, except that it keeps both sides of El Camino Real together. It doesn't use the road itself as a divider. It really keeps that corridor together. So you can see area 2 doesn't stop at El Camino Real. It comes across and gets at least both sides of the corridor, and actually comes over and gets Cappuccino High School as well. That gets trustee area 1, extends farther south in order to pick up that more population that it now needs. So it extends into the Burlingame High School attendance area. Area 3 then actually picks, we flip to the other side of El Camino Real, and then the south end of 1, and then area 3 get both sides of Burlingame High, really using the railroad tracks as the eastern boundary of area 3 until you get down to Aragon High, and 3, 4, and 5 are the same in this map down in the south end. So really the 3 and 3B are very similar. The question is just whether or not El Camino is the boundary, or whether the El Camino corridor is kept together in each map. So those are the maps you saw last time. We have a little bit more detail on demographics. Now that we're down to just 3 maps, we wanted to drill in and share some information that might be useful. As the board members and hopefully the members of the public are aware, we've shared a lot of data about every map. You can see, I'm not going to go through this slide, but this is just a snapshot of all the data that's available for each trustee area for each map. And one way you can look at this is by comparing key data that you as a board member or a member of the public considers important, to look at where are the differences. For example, if someone wanted to focus on limited English fluency and say, is there a trustee area that gives a particular voice where the people with limited English fluency would be particularly strong and concentrated? It can be a little tricky. You can see I've highlighted the 3 squares here to highlight that you can't just go straight down, because as the lines shift, that neighborhood that is particularly high limited fluency might shift from one area to another. So you can see in all 3 maps, D1, trustee area 1, 3, and 5 are essentially identical. And then the high limited fluency neighborhood switches from trustee area 4 in map 102 to trustee area 2 in 3 and 3B. So what that tells me is the area is kept together by all 3 maps. So all 3 maps would have a concentrated voice for that limited English fluency area. If we wanted to go back to the map just to see how this works, it works out that the north end of 4 is that in draft 102 is that area of particularly concentrated limited fluency. So it's in the north end of 4 and 2, and then it switches into area 2 in drafts 103 and 103B. So I don't think any map would jump out as being particularly strong based on giving a voice to that, a particularly stronger voice to that community. Another factor that sometimes comes up is there a part of the school district that has a concentration of families with children at home, or what we often run into is a like senior living development that will have a very low percentage of children under 18 at home. And in this case, all these numbers are essentially identical. You know, that they're pretty much the same, not just from plan to plan, but across the board. So you really have a similar rate of families in housing in all parts of the district. Now, income gets to be a little trickier to look at because there are 5 subcategories for each map. So one way folks tend to look at this is perhaps, you know, is there one map that has either concentrates the lowest income groups so that they're really focused and have a chance to elect their preferred candidates where they might not if they were grouped with a higher turnout, traditionally higher turnout, higher income area? Or is there a trustee area that doesn't have as large of the highest income bracket? So for example, you can see in map 102 in the top, the percentage of households that are in the highest bracket of data that comes from the Census Bureau. We've got 33 and 43 and 35, but then we got a 19 and a 22. So areas 1 and 4 are definitely not as concentrated in that highest bracket. Looking at say 103, again, we get the numbering shifts, but again, we have a 30, a 35, and a 44. And then we get an 18 and a 26. So in this case, you know, we have one that's lower than anything in map 102, but really 1, and then in area 2. And then, of course, the numbers are not going to shift a lot between 103 and 103B because the differences in the maps are not that big. But we do get a bit of a shift here of that concentration of the highest income folks goes from 26 in area 1 to 30%. And that comes out of area 3, which goes down from 44 to 39. So different ways of looking at it. Of course, you can also look at the other end of the spectrum. You know, under 50,000 in map 103B, you get a quarter of the people are in households earning under 50,000 a year in area 2. Similarly, you get 24% in area 2 in map 103. And in map 102, again, we kind of jump over to district 4 and we get up to that 24% over in 4. Education levels are a similar bit of a challenge because we're looking at the 3 ranges for each plan. But when you look at the graduate degree row, you can see there there's a 15 and a 19 in map 102, 15 and 19 in 103, and then a 15 and a 22 and a 23 in 103B that are all in that highest ranking. Not huge differences to differentiate the map or to give you a clear indication of which map would stand out in terms of education levels. And then the last kind of breakout of the data I was going to show you, and again, there's much more data in the full spreadsheets that anyone interested could look at, things like renters and owner-occupied housing and all that in the full data. But when we look at, is there a trustee area in one of the plans that particularly concentrates either any of the protected classes, so Latinos, Black or African Americans, or Asian Americans, the numbers of African Americans are very low in the district and in all the trustee areas in each map. But we get in 102, we get a 22% Latino seat and 21% Latino seat. In maps 103 and 103B, we get more of a concentration. So instead of 2 that are in the low 20s, we get 1 that's 27%. So that's a different breakdown. I don't know that you'd say one is any better than the other because you're still nowhere near a majority. So it's an interesting policy question of, are Latinos better off having a 27% voice in 1 seat or 2 seats where they're in the low 20s? Asian Americans do get up higher. 37, 34, 39. There are different pockets of Asian Americans throughout the district, as you know. So in that case, we're getting 3 in the mid to high 30s. In the 103 and 103B, we get 2 that are 39% or 40%. So again, we're a little more concentration in 103 and 103B, getting higher numbers in 2 seats, but giving up a 3rd seat where they could be higher. So these are just different ways of looking at the numbers, and if that helps you make a decision, I'm happy to hear that. Once you choose a map, then there's the decisions about election sequencing. We can come back and talk in much more detail about this once you have a map, because these decisions are the same for all 3 maps. So the breakdown of how the sequencing works shouldn't be driving which map you choose because it's the same. But what we end up with is trustee areas by statute get assigned years if there's a board member resident in it. And so in each of these maps, you have 1 trustee area where there's only a single board member. And so that drives the assignment to that one. Where you have a choice is the 2 areas where you have a pair of trustees, both of whom are in different election years. And so then it comes down to the board deciding which year should each one of those seats be up, 2022 or 2024. And then on the flip side, the 2 vacant seats, when would they come up? So in this case, what I'm showing you here is that each pair could either be in 2022 or in 2024, with the 2 vacant seats in the flipped. But of course, you could switch that if you wish to. And we can come back, as I said, and talk more about this once you have a map in mind, either today or at your next meeting. So that's my presentation. As was mentioned, I and Jonathan Berry Smith from Liaison Smith are here and happy to answer any questions. I don't know, Mr. Berry Smith, if you had anything to add at this point.
Thanks, Doug. I would just add a little bit to the sequencing discussion at the outset. I think there may have been there usually is some confusion because it can be a little bit tricky, especially when there are trustees that are paired together. So just at the outset, there would be no switching regardless of what sequencing we choose, no switching in the staggering of elections. So there will be 3 trustee areas up for election in 2022 and 2 up in 2024. There's really no way to change that in statute. It could be done through a judicial decree or a court order, but for our purposes here, the sequencing options that we'll provide, 3 trustees in 2022 and 2 trustee areas in 2024. Another just fundamental aspect of the sequencing is that no board member's term will be cut short based off of this. Each board member was elected for a 4-year term. They'll get to play that out regardless. I think the question comes up is, will a particular trustee be able to run again in that area come the expiration of their term? That's where I think the question and the nuance and the different permutations come into play. But as Doug mentioned, these are decisions that we can finalize at the end once a map is decided, or if trustees have questions at the outset that they want us to try to talk or work through, that's always something that we're able to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we ready to take public comment in the public hearing? Okay, I think I see 3 hands raised in the attendees.
I'm trying to promote Miss Brucker. I will go back. I'm not able to promote. I will go to Miss Jennifer Way.
Good evening.
Hello. So thank you so much for your work tonight. I know that no one likes more meetings, and I'm so encouraged by your receptiveness to community requests. So thank you very much for having this meeting. I found the explanation of key data points to be very helpful tonight. So again, thank you so much for walking us through that data. And thank you so much, Mr. Barry-Smith, for raising that issue of the implications of voting and what that looks like for our trustees. I think that's something that I would have loved to, this is something I would have loved to have seen at Unity in the community and at the Equity Advisory Board, and just, you know, as part of that rollout and community outreach that you had done, that board members and the district had done earlier. I would have loved to see this because I think it just clarifies so much, and the data by itself is so alienating. So one, I wanted to use my time to, yeah, right. And most of those meetings were at 10 p.m. and I could see you all just like really struggling through that. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. I definitely went to sleep and then watched on YouTube the next day. But so yeah, I really wanted to say thank you for that. And just lift up that notion that like what this process has revealed for me as a teacher in the district is that when important issues come up, our community outreach could be a little bit better when it comes to just bringing the information in ways that our community can digest, and trying to reserve a little bit more time so that we can get the walkthrough as well as the sort of raw data. You know, getting this support right now is great, but I know that time is short, and I know that, you know, I find data sometimes difficult and maybe a little bit boring. I'm an English teacher, but most of the time it's exciting. So again, thank you so much for doing this, for making the data transparent. Next time, please, 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 my plea is for you to do it when you reach out to the community during those community meetings, to request that time so that everyone can be on board at that moment. And then finally, I did want to ask a question about income distribution within bands. I still think that map 102 is probably my favorite, but are there any implications for example, if we look at map 102, district 1, the numbers are pretty in terms of income. If we're looking at your income slide, it looks like the numbers are pretty not super evenly distributed, obviously, because there's that really big band across the board for the 75,000 to 200,000 annual income band. But then when I look at those other numbers, it looks like some numbers are really well distributed and others are not. And so I wonder about those implications for voices to be drowned out by, you know, just majority voices. So that's something that I wanted to lift up to the board as well for your consideration, thinking about distributions within districts and what that majority might look like. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will try to promote Miss Marilla Brecker again. Okay, oh, I believe she is coming in. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know where she went to. I will bring in Miss Jennifer Blanco now.
Good evening.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm sorry. Good morning. I'm sorry. Good evening. Holy, I'm so sorry. I'm on the wrong time. Long day. Good evening, trustees. Superintendent Skelly and staff and members of the community that's on this meeting tonight. So I am in San Bruno. I am also a trustee in San Bruno on the San Bruno Park School District. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but San Bruno is already split in two. We share, we have two supervisors that represent our city here in good old San Bruno. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of issues that come with that. And I actually would prefer that I'm asking that we are not split in half again, because I do feel that there are going to be some issues coming up with that again. I find it very problematic that our city has to share two supervisors that represent us on the Board of Supervisors here in San Mateo County. And seeing the map 103 and 103B, which is the newest one that came about at the last meeting, which I apologize, I wanted to speak, but I was not able to attend. I'd like for us to keep San Bruno together as a cohesive community. I would really much appreciate for us not to be split up in half. As much as I appreciate the logic behind having our English language learner or our economically disadvantaged population of our communities, that still splits up our city and our communities. And so I'm going to assume that the person that's going to represent us on your board is going to be representing all populations, regardless of cultural backgrounds or socially economically disadvantaged situations that our families might be in. So that's all I want to say, and I just want to make this known to you all that we're already split in half. And I really, if I was on your board, I would vote for map 102. So thank you for the time to speak at your meeting tonight.
Thank you for coming in and speaking.
I will now bring in Ms. Chavez. Ms. Chavez, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was having trouble here unmuting and also the video. There we go. Sorry, everybody. I won't say good morning like Trustee Blanco. I'll say good evening. I'm on the school board along with Trustee Blanco. I want to say thank you for your presentation. This is my third meeting that I've joined or listened in regarding the district boundaries, by trustee elections. I did want to comment last meeting that I attended, I believe it was last week. I wanted to say that you're doing a fantastic outreach job. When I go to the website, that's the first thing you see, by trustee area elections. I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook, Twitter, emails. I'm also on the Diversity and Equity Committee. We've talked about it there as well. So it is out there. I did want to say, I almost raised my hand last week during the meeting, and I know that it's a long meeting, so I appreciate everything that you're doing and staying late, right? I wanted to say that San Bruno City Council is going through the very same thing, district boundaries. So everyone up and down the peninsula is hearing this from all angles. So that might be why, I know last week you were asking, you were wondering why there aren't that many participants. I think people know about the meeting, they're aware of it. They might just be overloaded about by trustee area elections, and they might be comfortable with the maps that are already drawn. That's what I was going to say last week, and I didn't have a chance to, so I apologize. Like I said, we're going through the same thing for City Council in San Francisco. We've heard from numerous entities that are experts in this area. So I feel like everyone knows what that means by trustee area elections. And I do want to say that I agree that I agree with Jennifer Blanco that map 102 keeps communities intact. It looks like it keeps cities more intact. It definitely keeps all of San Bruno and probably most of Millbrae intact. So I think that that's really important instead of splitting a city in half. But I'm looking out for the folks in San Bruno. You guys have a challenge ahead of you to pick which map you feel best fits our high school district. So I want to thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for allowing me to speak, and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I don't see any other raised hands.
That looks like everyone, President Hanley.
So I am going to close the public hearing at this point. So we can discuss further. I think we got support for 102. Ms. Dwyer, go ahead. You are muted right now.
Am I first?
Yes, you're
Oh, thank
first.
you. I missed my name. I have unstable internet. I definitely, I prefer 102 because it keeps our elementary districts coming to us in whole. And I agree with the speakers too, but I really like to see the feeder districts come into their schools, and keeping those communities together, I think is something, that's such a plus to come out of this. You know, it's something we have to do, but I feel like it's a real win for the district to have the feeder students come to their high schools together from their schools. I brought up El Camino as a divider, which you know, historically has had, which side are you on? The train track is the same thing. Which side of the tracks are you on? And I think that's something, another thing I would be happy to eliminate, train tracks in El Camino. We're all one people. And so I prefer the feeder district method 102. Thank you.
Mr. Land.
I just want to thank the speakers. I'm bummed we didn't get to hear from the third one, but it seems like we know what we're doing. I think, you know, just to reiterate what Ms. Dwyer said, I think keeping the feeder districts together is important, and I think that's what we should do. So I'm all for 102, but I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm glad, like Jennifer Way said, that we had an additional meeting just in case, just to verify. And I think that's what we're doing, and I'm glad we're taking a little extra time to do it, but it sounds like we're doing the right thing. I do want to say that I appreciate how thorough we've been and how we've been through the process in such a good way. So I'm proud of us as a board, how we did this. So thank you.
Trustee Zuniga.
Yes, thank you. I am really happy that I think we might even all be in consensus. Thank you to the board for all of us doing our job like we normally do, and you know, not only advocating for what we think is right, but then also taking into consideration input that's been given to us. So thanks to my colleagues, but I wanted to also thank everyone that speaks on behalf of their communities. This is what this process should be. We should be able to hear from everyone in their own opinions and how it will directly affect them. Because, like, you know, ultimately it will always affect our students and their families. So I'm really excited that we have gotten enough information, and thanks to the demographer and to our attorneys for giving us the information that we need. But my biggest priorities were to get representation for the northern part of our district, and it seems that we're going to be able to do that. And then also considering, you know, what it means. I had no idea that, like, what the implications were to split San Bruno. So I'm really happy that we have colleagues in different areas and people that we can consult with that will inform us of what's happening to them and how it affects them directly. Because again, you know, each number in the statistics, each person that we talk about is a human being, and they are actual people that will be affected. So thank you.
Trustee Griffin.
Quickly, everybody has said it all. We were in favor of 102, and I continue, and I do want to thank people. And if there was any public comment, we really needed to hear from the north end of the district, who really has not had the representation. And I think that was part of the process to begin really getting the representation. distributed so that everybody in the district has a voice. So, I mean, I thank them, and I know they have to go to their own meetings and to come to our meetings. You're really doing a double duty there. It was an arduous process, and it was just really difficult to just look at these charts and these numbers and these abstract maps and data. And the more data I looked at, the more confusing. And I had to sit this morning, I had to take a full step back to figure out what is the task, and not the, you know, I found myself looking at the trees and not at the forest, and kind of backed out of it to get a general sense of what we were trying to accomplish, and not looking at every percentage point movement here and there, and from variance from the norm or variance from the mean or whatever. So anyway, that's my comment.
Okay, so now we get down to kind of crunching the sequencing, which is often the as difficult as going through all of this data and all of the maps has been. The sequencing can be a little bit tough. So I want to take us down this road so we can make some progress and finalize this process next week at our meeting on the 24th. And I want to make sure that I understand this exactly right. So Jonathan, maybe let me say my interpretation, and you tell me if it's right. And I'll just start with, I'll start with District 4, where I'm in with Trustee Zuniga. So if the proposed election sequence were to put us into the 2022 election, my term expires this year. Trustee Zuniga's term expires in 24. So if we were up, if that district were put up this year, I would have to run. If I wanted to stay on the board, I would have to run. And if I were elected, I would have a term going until 2026. Is that correct?
So it's an excellent question. I'm glad we're going into this. This is one scenario where I believe, and I'll have Doug jump in, that there could be a difference between the traditional state board advisory opinion of what happens when trustees are paired in different election years, like a 2022 with a 2024, versus what I believe San Mateo County will allow. So there is one interpretation where, remember when I said earlier that trustees never get their term cut short. So following that logic, the fact that Trustee Zuniga term ends in 2024, one interpretation is, since she's already in Area 4, there's a board member already in that seat, and so no one else can run for that seat because there's already a board member in it. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation, which I believe has been allowed in San Mateo County as a whole, is that you can phase in by trustee areas. And what I mean by that is, Trustee Hanley, you would be able to run for the seat that lasts from 2022 to 2026, and that will be a by trustee area seat. And then Trustee Zuniga would be able to continue her term as an at-large board member until 2024. And those are the two interpretations that I'm aware of. Yeah, Dr. Johnson, what are your thoughts on this?
So let me just ask you, if I chose to run, because in 2024, then Trustee Zuniga would have no place to run. She would be finished, basically, right? If I were to be elected in 2022, then in 2024, because lives in trustee area 4, she could not run again
Until 2026. when
until
you're running
2026.
For your reelection.
Right.
Exactly. And I just want to add to that thought process. Regardless of whether you ran or anyone who ends up in that seat would prevent Trustee Zuniga from running again in 2024 based off of the latter interpretation that I described.
Let me ask you, Trustee Zuniga could run for that trustee seat in 2022. Is that correct?
And that is another, yes, no, thanks for what could happen, even though in that interpretation, she's in an at-large seat until 2024.
Yeah.
One option is for her to run for the by trustee seat in 2022. And the way that I interpret it is she wouldn't have to preemptively resign from that seat in order to run. She could run, see what happens, and then if she wins, resign the at-large seat, and then is now in the cycle of 2022 to 2026, et cetera, et cetera. So that is an option. I'm glad you brought that up.
So she and I theoretically could end up running against each other, and somebody else, I mean, numerous other people could run also.
That
Correct?
is an option with the San Mateo County interpretation, which, I mean, it allows for more, flexibility. The state board advisory opinion that I mentioned earlier is kind of more straightforward and doesn't allow for at-large trustees at the same time as by trustee area trustees. But hopefully, I mean, this really good discussion. Dr. Johnson, do you have anything to add to that?
So let me, before we go to him, let me just clarify, because I want to clarify this position. So if we go with the alternate sequence and we put my current area 4 into 2024, I'm effectively done, right? For until 2024, right? I cannot, my term expires in 2022. I could not run again for the board until 2024. Is that a correct interpretation?
The alternate sequencing is actually more straightforward, based off of what you just shared. When you have a 2022 trustee who ends up in a 2024 election year with a trustee who is up for election in 2024, then regardless of the interpretation, from my understanding, whether it's a state board advisory opinion, whether it's a San Mateo County interpretation, like when your term ends in 2022, there won't be a election for trustee area 4 because it doesn't occur until 2024 based off of the alternate sequencing. So it would, yes, effectively mean that you would not have anywhere to run until 2024.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify as to how this worked. Dr. Johnson, did you have anything you wanted to add before we go to Trustee Land's question?
No, I was just going to bring up that midterm campaign option that you brought up. So,
okay, Trustee Land.
So taking that logic and assuming that if we did the proposed election sequence and you guys, so what if it was a split decision, meaning Zuniga and Hanley decide to have at large and Land and Dwyer decide to run against each other? Is that possible? Do you know what I'm saying? Or do they both have to go within the sequence of the same choice?
No, this is what you're hitting on, exactly what I had in mind when I put the other alternatives are possible, is one of the paired seats could go in 2022 and the other one in 2024. It's certainly an option. The challenge was if I listed every option, I think it works out to about 8 different scenarios, and get crazy.
Okay.
So, but yes, you can opt to split them if you wish.
Right. And yeah, to follow up on that, one way of thinking about it is which trustee areas do you want up for election in 2022? That could be an easier way to think about it. Oh, do we want it to be as the proposed trustee areas 2, 4, and 5? In the alternate, do we want it to be trustee areas 1, 3, and 5? In theory, it could be 1, 2, and 5, or like all of those permutations are available. And I don't want to like muddy the waters too much, but one thing to think about in determining whether or not you want which areas you want. I know that there's been a lot of talk today about the San Bruno area and trustee area 1. Is a question, do you want that area to be up for election? It's a vacant area currently. Do you want it to be up for election right now, like coming up in 2022? Or would the board and community prefer for that area to have its open seat elected in 2024, which is a presidential year, and more people come out typically on presidential cycles than the off cycles. So there's this other, if you're trying to figure out why put one trustee area up for election in one year versus the other, those are usually the main arguments, whether you want someone elected from that area now, or if you want them to historically be in a cycle that most people come out for elections.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges. 2 of every 4 years, we have this confusion in the California Voting Rights Act, because the law says you should assign the seats to further the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act. So if the next election is a presidential election, then it's pretty clear. A historically underrepresented or low turnout area, both we get on the presidential cycle, which is Jonathan just mentioned is a definite advantage for them, and we get them up in the next year. Unfortunately, our next election is a gubernatorial election, so you have a split in which is best. Is it to get representation for that area as soon as possible by putting it up in 2022? And then and keep in mind, it's a permanent decision. So that leaves that area on the off-cycle election permanently. Or is it better to wait 2 years and have that area be on the higher turnout presidential year permanently? And there's no right answer to that. It's a dilemma.
Let me throw this out for consideration. I know we don't have to make final election decisions like until August, but I'm leaning not. I mean, I've been on 5 terms, and I am leaning to not being on for a 6th term. So I just put that out there so that if we have to box me out, I guess I would accept that, because I'm leaning that way anyway. I mean, 21 years is a long time.
You're old enough to drink.
Yes.
Can I make my comments?
Yes,
That's
make your
okay.
comment.
I mean, I want to agree with Peter on this because, okay, the purpose of this is to spread the wealth, so to speak, so that we increase the representation throughout the district, and that we particularly increase the representation in the north, which has not been represented in a few terms because the people who were up there didn't run again, and that kind of ended. But the purpose of it would seem to me would be for us to, Peter and I would be out, Ligia would stay in, Greg would stay in, Bob would make his choice, and 2022 will play out as it plays out, with elections in 1, 3, and 5, because the seats in 2 and 4 would be filled. Is that correct?
Are you talking about the proposed or the alternate sequencing?
The regular sequencing, the normal, doing it normally.
That would be the alternate sequencing, yes.
Okay, the sequencing. So the people who would be running in 2022, Peter, Bob, and me. Peter and I would not be able to run because there are other people, 2 other trustees in the district who have terms that end in 24. But Bob would run because there's no other trustee would be in his district. And someone could run in 1 and people could run in 1 and 3. And that would be 2022, correct? Okay. I think that's the right thing to do. I do, because I think I don't think we should do this and then wait 2 years and then it's implemented. I don't think that's right for the people we represent. So that would put me out, but I'd rather do the right thing. And so that's and it would put Peter out, and Peter's already said how he feels about it. So I think we have to do the right thing for the people we represent, and that is to have 1, 3, and 4. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way too. Greg, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I totally agree with both of you. I don't want that, to be honest. I really like having you guys on the board, and I don't want to lose you. But so you're saying, or what I'm hearing is, the alternative election sequence would be the one that we go with, because what it would do is area 1, area 3, and area 5. So 2 vacant positions. So you'd open it up to two areas, particularly number 1, right away. And then I would stay on and Zuniga would stay on, because we both have been elected till 2024, because that's our legal sequence of elections. And then in 2024, areas 2 and 4 would be up for election. Now, the only thing
Linda and I can come back and run against you guys.
True. Not against me, but Linda and I could go toe to toe. But if we did it, but again, one of the things that you talked about, what intrigues me is the presidential election is 2024, and area 1 in 2024 might be a good thing. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I'm in thinking about this, I think the alternative is the better way to go. Not my favorite, but it's the better way.
Bob, what do you think?
Do you have a viewpoint?
What Greg had just said, that one probably is what does make the most sense. Although, the joking aside, to have those 2 seats open up, I think we could probably get it done. And the other thing, we do need to get it done and not let's open it up and get it going and not defer it for
2 years.
People forget about it. So
it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing.
Leah,
So then that makes me concerned for the upcoming elections, like how it's not going to be a huge election like it was with that large, but it's still an election, and people still have to kind of like get up to that speed, and there's a lot to do, and so it just makes me worry about the timeline for people to be able to declare and all that stuff. I know we haven't chosen anything yet, but I don't know how. I guess if we could assist in that, like, I don't know. I think every scenario is concerning in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's it.
There was 8 months to.
Yeah.
There's 8 months before the election.
I was going to say it's a pretty big election. We've got a election, assembly election, lots of people running for stuff. So
yeah, there's so much going on. That's the thing, right?
But that's a good thing.
That gets people going. So
yeah, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
So Linda, you had your hand up.
I'm so sorry. No, I didn't. I forgot to take it down there.
Okay, Greg.
I was just going to say, the thing that intrigues me though is also, because if you're really looking at the areas that are underrepresented, is 1 and 4 are the areas that really are areas we want to make sure are diverse, and will probably be that way with 102. So having 4 be in the presidential election is good, and then 1 being right away, that's also being good. So I look at it that way, where the alternative is still the best way to go, looking at all the factors and including what Lydia was worried about.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've made a decision and can deal with this fairly quickly next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg will be the senior member of the board, and boy, Ligia, you'll be senior pretty fast.
Lord.
But I think the district can. I mean, we should, people need to come to our meetings, watch us, see how it works. And be encouraged to reach out to people to talk about being a board member and what it means, that kind of thing.
Jonathan, can I ask a question? So this is a personal question. If by some weird imagination I need to resign, or I decide to resign for certain reasons, what happens then? Does Linda take the Area 2 seat till 2024? Does she still have to run in 2022 when she's up?
I'm looking at the map. I feel like, is this any different than if you were resigning and someone being appointed to fill your seat?
That's probably what would happen.
Yeah, that's usually you go for an appointment. If there's no one to appoint, then would have to throw an election. But I don't think this changes that just fundamental appoint someone if they resign.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I could get appointed to his seat.
Yeah. Okay. And just to add that while the presence of the different board members drives most of this, as you talked about, once the county committee approves your petition and sets it, then if someone resigns or whatever after that, it's already set. So if you were to resign between the county committee action in November, that's not going to flip your sequencing once it's been decided.
Okay.
Okay. I think there is no further business tonight. Am I correct? Yes.
Peter, or maybe this is a question for how we agendize this meeting next time. Would we bring forward an item that says, based on the board's discussion, the board is going to just. I just want to prepare the agenda item right. So, Jonathan, would we just say that based on the discussion, it feels like this is what the board's going to do, or what? How do we do this?
So
you could talk about this offline. You could talk about this offline with Jonathan.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's fine. We will. We'll do that.
Because it could, because you might need to spend some time on it.
Okay.
Being a lawyer.
I talk a lot.
No, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. I think she was talking about herself, not about you.
I was talking about myself.
Got it.
But I love statistics. Oh, Doug, do I love statistics?
Okay, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Good night.